According to a longitudinal study performed by the National Center for Education Statistics in 2018, 67% of the 23,000 11th graders surveyed ranked the cost of attending college to be very important in influencing their college choice, according to the study done by Ford, Kelly, and Lefebvre. Since we will both be college students in the fall, tuition has been a big issue on our minds lately, so we decided to take a deeper look into in-state tuition costs of different states, specifically Maryland and Pennsylvania. The topic for our presentation is attending college, paying in-state tuition, Maryland versus Pennsylvania. To begin, which state do you think would be cheaper to attend college based on in-state tuition fees? Well, the answer might not be as simple as you think. For this study, we followed a hypothesis test of two means, unknown and unequal standard deviations. The null hypothesis we utilized was that the average cost of in-state tuition at Pennsylvania colleges is equal to the average cost of in-state tuition in Maryland colleges. The alternate hypothesis we utilized was that the average cost of in-state tuitions of Pennsylvania colleges is different than the average cost of in-state tuition of Maryland colleges. We found our data from a college navigator created by the National Center for Education Statistics. This list consisted of all post-secondary institutions of every state, and so we focused our data collection from the enumerated institutions in Maryland and Pennsylvania. As a side note, we decided to include any trade institution, religious seminary, public colleges, and private universities in our data. This is because the Oxford Dictionary defines colleges as an educational institution or establishment, in particular, one providing higher education or specialized professional or vocational training. From the National Center of Education Statistics list, we found there are 85 post-secondary institutions in Maryland and 354 post-secondary institutions in Pennsylvania. For the purposes of our data collection, we plan to randomly select 50 colleges from each state. This was done by opening the Excel document organizing the college's information alphabetically for each state, utilizing a random number generator, then including the college located in that number row into our data.
Alright, so moving on to how we calculated our values from our data. For the mean of Maryland, we got 17,817. The standard deviation was 13,456.05, and the sample size was 50. For Pennsylvania, the mean was 17,707.78. The standard deviation was 6,454.475, and the sample size was also 50. Once again, the hypothesis test we used was the unknown and equal standard deviations. Using the lengthy degrees of freedom formula for this hypothesis test, you can see our work right here, which got us 70.415, which we rounded down to 70 as our degrees of freedom. We then used this finding in our estimator of standard deviation formula. This is it with our work put in, and we got 2,110.571. Next, using the test value formula, we calculated our test value to be 0.052. To make our bell curves, we used 3 different significances to make sure that every time we tested our tested values that it fell into the fail to reject region as we had perceived in 1. To make our bell curves, we found the test value by dividing our significance by 2 in each instance. This is because our alternate hypothesis was that there was a difference, so you have to make sure you divide it by 2. We also used the degrees of freedom we previously calculated. So for the 0.05 significance, the t-value was 2. For 0.1 significance, it was 1.671. And then for 0.01 significance, it was 2.66. As you can see, on all 3 bell curves, our value that we tested fell in the fail to reject region. However, something we noticed was in this table, as you can see, Maryland's minimum, first quartile, median, and third quartile values are all lower than Pennsylvania's, but Maryland's standard deviation is much larger, which you can see in this box plot. Here are the histograms for our data that we created using Sturge's rule. As a reminder, here's a quick definition of Sturge's rule in case you forgot. For the Maryland histogram, it seems that the shape of the graph is unimodal and the center is skewed right. There is also no outliers. For the Pennsylvania histogram, it seems that it was also a unimodal graph and it was a normal center and also seemed to have no outliers as well. After finishing the hypothesis test and examining the data, it was concluded that the null hypothesis failed to be rejected, and there was not significant evidence to suggest that the average cost of in-state tuition of Pennsylvania colleges is not equal to the average cost of in-state tuition of Maryland colleges. This was an interesting finding. As we stated before, we saw how Pennsylvania invests roughly twice as much than Maryland into higher education. The only bias that could be interpreted is choosing to disregard colleges that did not provide tuition data on the NCES College Navigator website. However, we chose to do this only because we believe the exclusion of an extremely small portion of the population would not cause a significant difference in the data's calculation. Also, deciding to use different sources to find the data for these specific colleges could introduce a new series of challenges, including different biases, outdated information, and inaccurate reports.
Here are our sources that we used.
We hope you enjoyed our presentation and maybe learned a thing or two about tuition in state.